Ellis Carter hadn't planned on attending the reunion, but when his assistant slipped the invite onto his desk with a note, "Might be good to show your face again. You're not a ghost." He sighed and told her to RSVP yes. Now, standing outside the familiar stone archway of Halton University's grand ballroom, he adjusted the cuff of his tailored charcoal suit, the one that cost more than his old college car. A line of luxury black cars waited along the circular driveway behind him, and inside, music and laughter poured from the open doors. 15 years since graduation, and somehow stepping onto campus made him feel 20 again. Ellis Carter, a voice called from behind. He turned. And froze. There she was, Faye Donovan. The girl he'd loved and lost, the one who shattered his heart the day she walked out of their dorm and never looked back. Her hair was shorter now, falling in soft waves just above her shoulders, and her dress was simple, nothing flashy, but it did something to him. It made his chest tighten, the kind of feeling he hadn't had in years. Not even with the models or actresses he'd taken out to charity galas. "Faye." His voice came out low, unreadable. He couldn't quite decide what emotion to land on. Shock, nostalgia, regret. She blinked, clearly just as surprised. "Wow, you look rich," he offered dryly. She laughed, a sound that hadn't changed at all. "Different, but yeah." "That too." They stood there awkwardly for a beat, the energy between them thick. "You came," she finally said. "I did," he replied. "Didn't think I'd see you here." "I wasn't going to come," she admitted, "but I guess curiosity won." He nodded slowly, then stepped aside. "Walk in with me?" Faye hesitated, then linked her arm through his. "Sure, why not?" Inside, the ballroom gleamed with golden chandeliers, white linen tables, and a live string quartet playing something classical. Waiters in tuxedos floated by with trays of champagne. Money had definitely touched this place since Ellis last saw it. "Guess we're not in dorm parties anymore," Faye said, raising a brow at the crystal chandeliers. Ellis chuckled. "No more red solo cups." They weaved through the crowd of former classmates. Ellis was stopped every few minutes, handshakes, back pats, people asking what he'd been up to. He gave vague answers, never liked talking about money at events like this, but people knew he was Ellis Carter, founder and CEO of Carter Tech, millionaire by 28, Forbes cover at 32. One of Manhattan's most eligible bachelors, still, somehow, standing next to Faye. None of it mattered. "Do you ever think about back then?" she asked as they found a quiet corner near the balcony. "Every now and then," he said, watching her. "Do you?" She didn't answer right away. "I thought about calling you more than once." "Why didn't you?" Faye looked away, her fingers brushing the edge of her champagne flute. "Because I was the one who left." He didn't answer. He remembered that night too clearly, her suitcase, her tears, the way she kissed him goodbye like it meant nothing. "I was scared," she added. "You were getting offers left and right, moving to New York. I didn't want to hold you back." "You didn't even ask what I wanted," Ellis said, voice low. Faye flinched. "I know." Silence stretched, then she met his eyes again. "Are you seeing anyone?" He shook his head once. "No, you." She gave a small smile. "No." Somewhere across the room someone called his name, but he ignored it. "I should have reached out," she whispered. "You still can." They stared at each other, years crashing between them. "I didn't expect to feel like this," Faye said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like what?" "Like if I leaned in right now, I'd still fall." Ellis didn't hesitate. He stepped in closer, his hand brushing her waist. "Then fall." A breath caught in her throat, and just like that, 15 years dissolved. He kissed her and she kissed him back, not polite, not casual, real. When they pulled apart, her hands were still on his chest. "I should have never let you go," Ellis said, his voice rough. "I'm here now," she replied, "if you still want me." Ellis let out a breath like something inside him had finally let go. "I never stopped." The night blurred after that. They talked for hours, tucked into a corner booth while the crowd thinned. He told her about his company. She told him about moving to Chicago, teaching art, and how she'd lost her dad last year. They spoke like no time had passed, laced with a new kind of honesty. At the end of the night, he walked her outside. Her ride hadn't arrived. Without a word, Ellis opened the door to his sleek black Bentley and gestured. "Come on, let me take you home," she hesitated. "You don't have to, I want to." The drive was quiet, intimate. His hand rested on the gearshift close to hers. When they pulled up outside the little bungalow she'd rented for the weekend, she turned to him. "I don't know what this is," Faye said. "It's not over," Ellis replied. "That's what it is." She paused. "Can I see you tomorrow? I'll pick you up at noon," he said. "For what? You'll see," she smiled. And when she leaned in again, he met her halfway. This time the kiss was slower, surer, as if they both knew this wasn't the end of something, it was the beginning. Ellis arrived at the small cafe 5 minutes early, stepping out of the car as a valet reached for the keys. The place wasn't flashy, just a quiet spot tucked along a tree-lined street with a patio shaded by rustling awnings, the kind of space that whispered familiarity rather than shouted prestige. He'd chosen it deliberately. For her, Faye was already at a table when he walked up, flipping through the menu with one leg crossed over the other, her sunglasses pushed up into her hair. She looked up, and something in her face shifted, not surprise, not awe, just a quiet recognition that sent a low hum through his chest. "You're punctual," she said as he slid into the seat across from her. "I wanted to be." They ordered quickly. She asked for the cinnamon brioche French toast. He went with black coffee and the eggs Florentine. The waiter disappeared, and for a moment, there was only the clatter of cutlery and the soft murmur of nearby tables. "I almost didn't come today," Faye said, wrapping her fingers around her water glass. "Woke up thinking maybe last night was enough. Was it? No," she looked out toward the street, "but I'm still trying to figure out what this is." "I'm not here for closure," Ellis said. "If that's what you're worried about, then what are you here for? Possibility?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned back, studying him like she was trying to understand something carefully buried. "I changed a lot after I left," she said finally, "not just cities. I had to start over. I worked at a bookstore my first year in Chicago, taught kids summer art classes in a gym basement. It wasn't glamorous. I didn't expect it to be. I just mean I'm not the girl you knew. I didn't come here looking for her." The waiter returned with their food, and they both paused to rearrange their plates. Faye took a bite, then set down her fork and wiped her lips with her napkin. "I dated someone for 5 years, she said. His gaze didn't flinch. "Are you still in touch?" "No, he wanted a world I couldn't give him. We were supposed to move to Seattle together. I backed out a week before." "You always did hate the rain." That pulled a laugh from her, cautious but real. "You remember that?" "I still remember the way you'd refuse to carry an umbrella even when it poured. Said it made you feel trapped. Still does." He sipped his coffee, watching the way she pushed her food around. There was something in her eyes flickering between comfort and caution. "Why are you really here, Ellis?" she asked. "You've got a life most people would kill for. Why dig up the past?" "Because not everything I left behind should have been buried." She went quiet, absorbing that. "Then, you never told me what you thought when I left." He tapped a finger against the side of his cup. "I was angry. For a long time, but then the anger turned into something worse. Distance. Distance from what? From feeling anything real." She blinked, startled by the honesty. "I built a company, made more than I ever thought I would," he continued. "But nothing ever made me feel the way I did when I was with you, and I didn't even realize that until last night. I'm not going to pretend nothing happened between us," she said slowly. "But I also can't pretend everything's the same. I don't want it to be. I want something new, if you do too." Faye didn't answer. Instead, she looked down at her plate, then back at him. "Come with me." "Where?" "Just come." They paid and left the cafe, walking 2 blocks to a small art gallery tucked between a florist and a wine shop. Faye pulled out a key and unlocked the door. "This is mine," she said, stepping inside. The space was modest: white walls, exposed beams, a few easels covered with drop cloths. Paint stained the wooden floor and sunlight poured through the skylight above. Canvases leaned against the far wall, unfinished, raw. "You own this. Rented for now. I curate local shows. Paint when I can." He walked deeper into the room, letting his fingers trail along the edge of a frame. "You always said you wanted your own space." "I didn't think I'd ever get it," she said behind him. He turned to face her. "Why'd you bring me here?" "Because if you're serious about this, about not burying what we had, I needed you to see who I am now." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "I see you." And the words, simple as they were, landed deeper than anything else he could have said. "Ellis," she whispered, her voice catching. "I'm scared." "So am I," he said. "But I'd rather risk everything than walk away again." She looked up, her eyes glassy but steady. "Then don't walk away." He took her hand, tangled their fingers. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in years, neither of them was running. Ellis stood in the center of the gallery, surrounded by bursts of color and half-finished canvases, but it was Faye who held his attention. She moved through the space like she belonged there, confident, grounded, utterly unlike the girl he once knew, but somehow even more captivating. "I have a show in 2 weeks," she said, lifting the corner of a cloth draped over a large canvas. "Group exhibition. A few local names, nothing big." "Why not something solo?" he asked. "Because I'm not there yet." She glanced back at him. "And because I like the collaboration. It keeps me from getting too lost in my own head." He stepped closer, careful not to touch anything. "You ever sell your own work?" "Sometimes," she said. "I don't paint for profit. I do it because it's the only thing that ever made sense, even when everything else didn't." Ellis looked around the space again. "What if you didn't have to worry about making it work?" "I already don't," she said. "I've got savings. A few grants. I'm not struggling." "That's not what I meant." "I know," she said, crossing her arms. "But if you're about to offer to buy me a building or fund my next 10 years of rent, don't." "I wasn't," he said. "I know what that would sound like." She leaned against the wall, eyes narrowed slightly. "Then what are you offering, Ellis?" "Time, support, not a handout. You don't need saving, I get that," he said. "But you do deserve someone who shows up." Faye studied him for a long moment, her gaze unreadable. "You always knew how to say the right thing." "I never said enough when it actually counted. I won't make that mistake twice." Her expression softened, just barely. "I don't want you to think I'm testing you. I'm not. I'm just..." "Careful now. You don't have to explain." "I do," she said, stepping away from the wall. "Because if we're going to try this again, I need to know I can trust the version of you standing in front of me, not the memory." "You can." Faye turned, walking toward a tall shelf near the window. She pulled down a small wooden box and handed it to him. "Open it," she said. He lifted the lid. Inside were old photographs, yellow-edged and curled. Some of them he recognized, snapshots from college, blurry dorm selfies, one of him asleep with a book on his chest. But there were others he hadn't seen. One of her painting in a sunlit studio, another of her in a crowd at a protest, eyes fierce. "I kept them," she said. "Even when I didn't think I should." Ellis closed the lid carefully. "Why show me this now? Because I want you to see I didn't forget. I just didn't know how to hold on and move forward at the same time." He nodded once, the weight of her words settling in. "Then let's figure it out together." Faye's phone buzzed from the counter. She glanced at it, then sighed. "I promised I'd help hang pieces at the community center this afternoon. One of the artists is showing his students how to frame their work." "Do you want company?" She looked surprised. "You'd come," he shrugged. "I'm not terrible with a hammer." Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say no but couldn't find a reason. "All right, sure, just don't wear anything you care about." Ellis followed her outside, where the sun had shifted lower in the sky, casting long shadows on the pavement. She drove an older hatchback with a cracked rearview mirror, and when he climbed into the passenger seat, he had to adjust his knees to fit. "I haven't ridden in a car without tinted windows in years," he said, glancing around. Faye laughed. "Welcome back to civilian life." The drive took them to a part of town Ellis wouldn't have recognized without a GPS. The community center was a modest brick building with faded murals on the side and a small parking lot surrounded by chain-link fencing. Inside, the air smelled faintly of tempera paint and sawdust. Children darted between easels, supervised by a wiry man in paint-streaked jeans. Faye introduced him as Mateo, and after a quick exchange, she handed Ellis a small toolkit and pointed to the far wall. Frames go up there. Make sure they're level. He got to work, keeping quiet, listening to the chatter of students and the occasional burst of laughter from the other side of the room. Faye moved easily among them, offering advice, gently correcting brushstrokes, making everyone feel like their work mattered. An hour passed before she joined him again, wiping her hands on a rag. "You okay?" "Fine," he said, holding up the level. "I might have actually learned something today. You didn't seem out of place." "I am out of place, I'm just good at pretending." She tilted her head. "You don't have to pretend with me." He looked at her, the corners of his mouth twitching. "You always knew when I was putting on a show." "I still do." They finished hanging the last frame before the sun dipped below the horizon. The kids were packing up now, some waving as they left. Mateo clapped Ellis on the back and mumbled something about not bad for a rich guy. Ellis and Faye stepped outside together as the sky turned violet. "Dinner?" he asked. "I have groceries," she said. "You cook, I have a chef." "That's not the same thing, I can learn," she smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "All right, but I'm not responsible if you burn my kitchen." They drove in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence filled with understanding, the kind that didn't need filling. Back at her place, she handed him a cutting board and a knife. He chopped vegetables while she stirred something over the stove. It was domestic, simple, and so far removed from his usual world that it didn't feel real, but it was. And for the first time in years, he didn't want anything else. Ellis leaned against the kitchen counter, sleeves rolled up, a dish towel slung over his shoulder. Faye stood at the sink rinsing the last of the dishes, her bare feet tapping lightly against the tiled floor. The quiet between them was easy now. Not heavy with unspoken things, but comfortable, settled. Still, something flickered in her eyes when she turned back to him, a thought she hadn't voiced yet. "You'll be leaving soon," she said, drying her hands. "I canceled my flight," Ellis replied, her brows lifted a fraction. "You had a flight?" "I did, Monday morning, but I pushed it." "Indefinitely." She leaned against the opposite counter and folded her arms. "You don't do that, you plan everything?" "I used to." "What changed?" "I don't want to live by deadlines anymore, not if it means missing this." He gestured vaguely between them. Faye looked down, then back up. "You always were all or nothing." "I still am." She hesitated, then crossed the space between them and reached into the drawer beside him. "I want to show you something." "But you have to promise not to laugh." "I haven't laughed at you once." She pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to him. It was aged, crinkled, the edges soft from time. When he opened it, he found a sketch, a rough pencil drawing of an apartment above a bookstore. There was a balcony with potted plants, a row of windows, and 2 chairs facing the skyline. "This was my dream," she said quietly. "Back in school, I told myself I'd get there one day." He stared at the drawing, then at her. "You still want this?" "I think I want something like it." "But maybe not alone this time." The words hit him like a pulse through his ribs. "I bought a place in Tribeca last year," he said slowly. "Penthouse. It's got a rooftop terrace, but it's cold, empty." She tilted her head. "Why are you telling me that?" "Because I'm thinking of selling it." Her eyes narrowed. "You're not serious." "I am. I want something that feels like home. That sketch. That's what home looks like to me now." Faye drew in a breath. "You don't have to prove anything." "I'm not trying to prove. I'm trying to build." She stepped back, watching him carefully. "It's been less than a week, Ellis." "I know, but this isn't new. What we had, it's just been waiting." He folded the paper and handed it back, but she pushed it into his coat pocket instead. "Keep it," she said. "Just in case." The next morning, Ellis called his office and told his assistant to pause all in-person meetings for the next 2 weeks. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. Then he turned off his phone and drove to the gallery. Faye was there, barefoot again, standing in front of a blank canvas with a brush in one hand and a mug balanced in the other. "Thought you might come," she said without turning. "I brought you something." Ellis replied, holding out a small, flat envelope. She set down the mug and took it. Inside was a printed invitation. "What is this?" she asked. "I rented a space for Friday night," he said. "Just one evening, you're the only artist showing." Faye's mouth parted slightly. "You didn't?" "I did, it's already done, catered, lighting set." "Your name's on the marquee." "I can't, Ellis, that's you can. And you will. I already spoke to Mateo, he's coming. So are a few gallery owners from the city." She stared at the invitation like it might dissolve in her hands. "I'm not asking you to be someone else," Ellis said. "I just want people to see what I already know." Faye touched the edge of the envelope, her fingers trembling. "What if they hate it?" "They won't. But if they do, they'll still remember your name." That Friday night, the rented loft buzzed with low music and warm light. Guests lingered near the wine bar, admiring the paintings displayed across the whitewashed walls. Faye's work, raw and luminous, her signature now etched into the corner of each piece. She wore a long navy dress, simple but striking, her hair pinned up with a few tendrils loose around her face. When she caught Ellis watching her from across the room, she crossed to him slowly. "I'm still shaking," she said. "You're glowing. I've never felt this exposed before. Then you're doing something right." Faye looked around at the crowd. "This night doesn't feel real." "It is. And it's just the beginning." She studied him for a long moment. "I think I'm falling in love with you again." "I never stopped," Ellis said, "but this time I won't let anything chase us apart." She stepped closer. "Then don't ever give me a reason to run." "I won't." "I swear it." The evening blurred into warmth and quiet celebration. At the end, when the lights dimmed and the last guests said their goodbyes, Ellis walked her to the window overlooking the skyline. "It's beautiful," she said. He turned to her. "So are you." Faye looked up at him, her eyes steady. "So what do we do now?" "We find the place from your sketch," he said. "With the chairs and the plants and the view." "And what if we don't?" "Then we build it." She laughed softly, then leaned into him. "I think you already stole my heart," Ellis murmured. "Good," she whispered. "Because you've had mine since the beginning." And as the city lights flickered behind them, he kissed her deep, certain, and filled with every promise he hadn't said aloud until now. They didn't need to talk about the future anymore. They were already living it. Ellis adjusted the cuff of his shirt as the elevator crept toward the top floor, his reflection staring back from the gleaming chrome panels. The building was quiet this time of day, the kind of quiet that made his thoughts louder. Faye had agreed to meet him at the new space, an old brownstone in Brooklyn they toured the week before, one with creaky floorboards and sunlit windows that overlooked a tree-lined street. She hadn't said much during the tour, but he'd noticed the way her fingers lingered on the cracked windowsills and how her eyes lingered on the rooftop garden. When the elevator doors opened, she was already there, perched on a windowsill with a sketchbook in her lap, her pencil moving in slow, thoughtful strokes. She didn't look up immediately. "You're early," she said without glancing his way. "You're earlier," he replied. Faye closed the sketchbook gently and stood, brushing graphite from her fingertips. "They accepted the offer. They did. It's ours." She blinked. "Already, I wired the deposit this morning. We can move in next week once the last inspection clears." Faye stepped closer, her brow slightly furrowed. "Ellis, are you sure?" He tilted his head. "You're asking me that after we picked out paint samples together? She paused. "I didn't think you'd go through with it so fast. I've wasted enough time waiting for things to feel safe. I want this, you, us, full stop." Her shoulders relaxed as she exhaled. "So we're really doing this. We're doing it." A quiet beat passed between them before she reached into her bag and handed him a folded piece of paper. "Then you should have this." He unfolded it carefully. It was a copy of the original sketch she'd shown him, the balcony, the chairs, the skyline, but this version had something new. A second sketch layered beneath, showing the same scene at dusk, bathed in lavender light with two figures seated side by side. "It's what I see now," she said. "What I want." Ellis looked at her, his voice softer than it had been all day. "I never thought I'd be the guy who gets the second chance." "You didn't get it," she said. You made it. They left the building together, walking without urgency, their hands naturally finding each other's. Outside, the air smelled like rain had passed through an hour ago, washing the city clean. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt like a held breath. As they turned the corner, Faye looked up at him. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't left back then? I used to, Ellis said, but now I just think about what's next. She touched his arm gently. What is next exactly? He stopped walking and faced her, eyes steady. A proposal, he said. Eventually, not today. Not because of timing or pressure or nostalgia, but because I want to build a life that holds everything we've been and everything we're becoming. Faye didn't look away. I want that too. He leaned forward, pressing a kiss to her forehead, then her mouth slow, certain, and filled with something deeper than excitement. It was presence. Commitment. Later that month, they moved into the brownstone. The rooftop garden was overgrown, but they cleared it together, laughing over tangled vines and cracked planters. Faye turned the second bedroom into a studio, sunlight pouring through the windows each morning. Ellis converted the attic into an office, though he spent more hours downstairs, leaning in doorways, watching her work. They made coffee in the mornings and shared quiet dinners on the balcony at night. Sometimes they spoke for hours, sometimes they didn't speak at all. It didn't matter. They'd learned the rhythm of each other's silences. Faye's next show was in Manhattan, and Ellis arrived early, carrying her newest painting. Critics praised her as a rising voice in contemporary art, but she only looked for him in the crowd. He was there always. One evening, 6 months later, he returned home to find the balcony lit with fairy lights, 2 glasses of wine waiting. Faye stood in the doorway, barefoot, holding a small velvet box. I know you said eventually, she said, but I don't need to wait. Ellis took the box, opened it, and found a delicate silver ring inside, simple and elegant. He looked at her, stunned. You're proposing to me. I figured we don't have to do things the usual way. He stepped forward, slid the ring onto her finger instead. We'll do both. Mine's coming next week. They married in a small ceremony on the rooftop, surrounded by friends, art, and the skyline that had once only existed in a sketch. Mateo officiated, her students drew portraits on napkins, and Ellis's assistant cried harder than anyone. They didn't need a mansion or a yacht. They had a home that echoed with laughter and music, a life built from old dreams and new beginnings. Faye painted. Ellis consulted when he wanted to. They traveled, explored, and always came back to that rooftop balcony. On cool evenings, they sat in the chairs she'd drawn all those years ago, sipping wine and watching the city lights flicker on. Side by side, no longer wondering what could have been, they already had everything they needed together. Always.